Hi and welcome. Bulk Mailer Merge Purge, Simply Powerful Functionality. Now, this webinar is actually a continuation of our Getting the Most Out of the Bulk Mailer series. So there were 4 of these previously, and we're actually working into the next section of these. So this would be number 5 in the series. If you missed the first 4, they're up on the SatoriSoftware.com website. Feel free to go take a look at those. If you've got suggestions about future bulk mailer, getting the most out of bulk mailer webinars, we would love to see those in the suggestion box at the end of the webinar here. So we'd love to get those. Before we get started, just a couple of very quick housekeeping items. First one, if you participate in social media, so does Satori Software. We would love to hear from you on Twitter, LinkedIn, and Facebook. You guys probably know better how to work that than I do, so I won't give you instructions, but we'd love to hear from you. Next, this webinar is being recorded. Now, we record these things so that we can post them up on SatoriSoftware.com. That way you can go back and refer to them if you'd like, or if something is said that you would like someone else to hear, feel free to pass that link around. We will mail the link around to the recording in a little thank you email after the webinar is over. I usually have it posted by, well, it should be up by this afternoon. Now, this one's really important, and I can see Bob and Kim cringing. I assume Bayard is as well. The question box. We like questions. These webinars are designed to answer questions. So in the event that you have an offhand thought or a question, you want to compliment Kim on her perfect diction or something similar, please put that into the question box that you'll see on the right-hand side of your screen. We love to get that stuff. I will be interrupting as we go and trying to ask the questions in real time, and anything else will get batched up at the end, and we'll ask those. Anything that doesn't get answered, it's probably because it was specific enough that we want to make sure that we answer your exact situation. So we do follow up with those after the webinar. So don't worry if your question didn't get answered on the air. We will follow up with you. Finally, this webinar is currently scheduled to last 60 minutes. Now, we've got Bob, Kim, and Bayard, and well, me, and we all do like to talk. So it might run a little long. If at the top of the hour you have to drop off, we completely get that. It's being recorded. You can always come back and pick it back up, but we do want to be respectful of your time, so we're going to try to keep things moving along and keep them within the 60-minute mark, or somewhere thereabouts. Now, let's see, who are we going to be talking to today? Today, we've got Bob Shimmick, Senior Director of Postal Affairs for Satori Software, and he's going to be adding our color commentary, sort of the Madden of Satori Software. Isn't that right, Bob?
That's right. Thanks.
Excellent. Can you do a Madden impression?
No, okay, I'm going to pass on that.
Yes. That's probably best anyway. Kim Mock, Senior Product Manager. Kim owns the bulk mailer product, so if pretty much anything's fair game to ask Kim if we want to find out why is it called bulk mailer. She could probably answer that.
Yep. Sure can.
Fantastic. And then, let's see, off in the remote, the whole other Satori floor, we've got Bayard, and Bayard Butow is going to be doing a demonstration for us. He's a senior technical support engineer, so if you've ever called in about bulk mailer, you may have talked to Bayard. Bayard, you with us?
I'm here, standing by.
And he's got a great demo set up for us. So what we're going to do is just a little bit of background about the product. We're going to talk a little bit about Merge Purge, what it is, what it does. Kim's going to give us some information about that. Bob will be doing his color commentary thing. I think he sounds like Madden. And then Bayard will be moving into the demo. So please feel free to keep those questions coming in. We will collect them and pass them along to the appropriate folks as we go. Now, things we want to talk about. First off, let's define Merge Purge. What is this?
Right. So we wanted to talk a little bit about how you manage multiple files. So there are some companies that will have just a single mail list, and that's the only list that you ever really work with, and you keep it maintained over time. But more and more commonly, as the mailing industry grows and we kind of branch out into more of that multimedia thing, it's more common that you're going to be working with multiple lists to try and refine the actual set of people that you're going to wind up mailing to. And so that Merge Purge tool is a way for you to kind of massage those different files that you have and combine them or separate them in ways that make sense to create that final list of people that you're actually going to be sending out to. So it's mostly just a list management and kind of selection tool for you.
So I'm super excited about this webinar. Do you know why?
Why is that?
Because I have the job of promoting these webinars. And so as a result, I have various people, customers, salespeople here at Satori. Folks come to me and they say, hey, can you add these people? Can you promote the webinar to these people? And so I end up with a large selection of lists. Sometimes those lists have conflicting information on them, and sometimes they have duplicates. Sometimes they have people that I don't want to market to for one reason or another. But my job is actually to market these webinars out to large groups of people from a wide variety of lists these days. I assume that I'm going to learn something here that can help me with that.
That's right. Yeah. I mean, managing those different bits of information. Maybe you have one list that has some set of demographic information, and you have another that has account information, and you want to take that information and merge it into a mutual record that has all the information about that customer.
That sounds wonderful.
Yeah. I mean, it's a really interesting way that you can actually take all those disparate bits of information, combine them, and come up with a master list that's going to serve your ultimate purpose.
Well, I'm going to ask a lot of questions here because this sounds like it suits me perfectly, because you should see the list for this webinar. I got them from everybody and their uncle had somebody. Can you invite these people? Well, yes, I can, but I'll have to add them to my list. So perhaps I do need Merge Purge. I think we're going to learn more about that. Some common scenarios. We're going to talk about, perhaps my examples will come up here. We're going to talk a little bit about, you've got a list from 4 lists from 4 different people, and here's the way to put them together and to clean up after yourself. I'm excited about that. Now, the demonstration, this is really cool. Baird has been doing this for a while, and he's standing by. He's got a great demo for us, so I'm really looking forward to learning from that. And of course, as we mentioned, the questions and answers, really important. I've got the question box open here, so feel free to toss them on out. And Kim, you want to get us started with this?
So one thing before we jump into the interesting thing about Merge Purge is this is one of the tools that we use within the mailing industry that really doesn't have any regulations around it. I mean,
so there's no requirement.
You have your address cleansing technology, you have your pre-sorting technology. Both of those are very much driven around USPS rules and regulations. Where Merge Purge is more of, I've heard it referred to as kind of a black art, because the ones that can do it really well can gain a lot of benefits from it.
So this is something that will save me time, obviously, when I talk about having to handle multiple lists to promote an event like this. This is in my best interest, but you're telling me that the USPS is not going to demand that I do it.
Right. There are no rules or regulations associated with this tool, but it's a very important component in being able to execute mailings very effectively.
Right.
Well, and it does ultimately save me money, because when I send invites out to the same person 4 times because 4 different people included that person on their list, I've just wasted postage, I've just wasted print costs. Not good. So there's an immediate impact from that.
Correct.
Perfect. Do I need Merge Purge?
Maybe.
Okay.
So it really depends on what your processes are. And so there are, like I said, sometimes there are mailers out there that have one single input file. They just need to clean it, sort it, and then send it out, and then they're ready to go. And so for those mailers that have just that really simple process, they have one single input file that they get from their customer, and they just pump it right through. They get it all cleaned up, move update, sorted, and out it goes. Merge Purge isn't the right tool for them. So we've said it on these webinars before. We're not in the business of selling you something you don't need. So if you find that you're part of that scenario where you just have a single input file for each mailing and you don't really do anything to it, then Merge Purge isn't the right tool for you.
So that might be people, for example, that maintain a single customer list.
Right.
And then they just consistently market to that same customer list, or consistently mail to those people. So at that point, you've got a list, you maintain it. Obviously, address correction and things like that are probably still valuable, but you may not have a lot of lists written on napkins like I have for these things.
Well, and even, you might think about like a really basic, like a periodical mailer.
Sure.
So for the most part, you're just working with your main subscription list. You're constantly going through and refreshing the list, making sure all of your subscription information is correct, and you're really not comparing that list to another list down the line, or you're not taking another list and combining it. So, but those are for the really basic periodical mailers. But there are periodical mailers who might want to take their subscription list and compare it with a group of people that has a certain demographic or that has some other information, and see where those overlaps are, and kind of analyze that list in a way that's really interesting to maybe refine the message for those individual people. And ultimately what it can do is it can wind up making your mailing much more effective. So if you're able to tailor a message specifically toward that recipient, or even just that recipient's demographic, it can be a much more powerful message, and you wind up getting a much more powerful response.
So there's those who don't need it.
Rob, can I? This is Baird.
Baird, of course.
Just to Kim's point there, a periodical mailer, they have their list, but there's a lot of people in those neighborhoods who don't currently subscribe to their newspaper. So wouldn't it be nice to have a list of everybody in that neighborhood, but remove the current subscribers from that list, so that you could now blanket a message to the non-subscribers and let them know that they've got an opportunity, discount or something like that, to begin subscribing to the newspaper without sending it to current subscribers. So a case like that, the Merge Purge tool, because it has this exclusion or suppression capability, could be helpful for a periodical.
Right. Yeah,
publisher.
that's a really good case study. We've seen that a couple times, where a lot of times if you're a periodical mailer, you're wanting to get the best postal discounts possible, right? So you want to be able to have a really high saturation of customers in a certain area. So for example, a zip code or a carrier route, because the more pieces that you're sending to that area, the better discount you're going to get per piece.
Sure.
So marketing to those people that are not on your list can be a really powerful thing.
So so if you have a very basic list and you go through those same people over and over again, maybe you don't need it. But if you have a bigger list and maybe you might need it. And then in my case, where you've got multiple lists, plainly.
Yeah, and I mean, it's really kind of this progression that we're seeing within the mailing industry. It used to be that they used to do basically spray and pray mailings, right? You would just blanket as much information as you can. You'd mail to the whole list and just hope that somebody would buy.
And a few people would pick up your mailing, look at it, and go, "What were they thinking?"
Right.
This isn't for me.
Right. And so, that used to be a really common technique.
It's expensive.
And it can be expensive, especially as postage increases and
print costs,
and, ink and everything. It all adds up. And now it's not so much about the number of people you send to, it's about the amount of revenue you're getting per piece. So what's the response rate? What's the actual quality of the mailing that's being sent out, and how appropriate is that message to your market? So this is a tool that allows you to kind of take that extra step. So if you're even in this situation where you've got a really basic flow today and you're interested in taking that next extra step, then this Purge tool can give you one of the little pieces to that puzzle.
Cool.
So just to kind of have a little graphical representation of a little bit more of a complicated process flow, you might have multiple input files. So like Rob said, he's got multiple lists from multiple different people that he's combining together to try and market a webinar, or it could be a new product or service.
Out of curiosity, those lists often come in different orders. So I'll get them. So it's sometimes his first name, last name. Sometimes it's last name, first name. Then it's there's a city, and then the street. Can I map that, or do they all have to be in the same format?
Yeah, and I think Baird will probably show this in the demo, but the input file format doesn't really matter as far as the Merge Purge tool is concerned. It just knows I've got multiple input files and I need to work with them together. So the import process is kind of separate, and you can do a separate import process per file.
Okay.
So that gives you the flexibility. So if you have some lists that are coming in as Excel spreadsheets, or some are coming in as text files, or how, Access database or a DBF file.
What about Post-it notes?
you'd probably want to type those in.
Okay.
We don't have that ability quite yet,
Darn.
but as soon as it's in that electronic format, you can import them in as all their different formats, whether they're a different file type or the different mapping of the fields. All of those get combined together. Now, if you have some type of a list that you want to compare against, so like in Baird's example, if you have your subscription list and then you have the list of everybody in the zip code, well, you want to get everybody that's not on your subscription list that's in that zip code, right? So that's what we call an exclusion file. And so you'd be able to map that in separately and filter out those records. And then you can go through the rest of the process of correcting the addresses and doing your move update and sorting and getting it ready for your actual mailing.
I might just add also, Kim, some of the mailers I've been talking with, they're looking for a way to differentiate themselves from a company that just does straight up mailing. And Merge Purge gets you into the area that we call data quality. Mm-hmm. And by offering that as an add-on capability, allows that mail service provider to sort of market to a larger set of clients.
Right, and even just the manipulation of the files doesn't have to be for the end goal of a physical mailing. So the Merged Purge tool doesn't just deal with address data. It does deal with address data because that's super important for identifying your end customers, but all the other data that you have for the customer as well. So if you have email addresses, phone numbers, other information that you want to use, if you have their Twitter handle or what have you, you can include that as part of the Merge Purge process. And use that as a comparison to basically create your end list that doesn't necessarily have to be for mailing. It could be, but it does kind of expand your opportunities there and your capabilities that you can offer to your end customers if you're a mail service provider.
I want to throw out here, Jennifer, we got your question here. It looks kind of specific to your situation, so we will follow up after the webinar on that one rather than go into the details, but we will make sure we follow up with you right after the webinar.
Okay. All right.
Common scenarios.
So these are just kind of some cherry-picked scenarios. Obviously, there are more than 5 different ways that you can use Merge Purge, and once you see the demo from Baird, you'll understand the different complexities that you can add there. But these are kind of some straightforward examples that we can kind of talk through. So one of them is Rob's example. So if you have multiple lists coming from different areas and you want to create a master list. So if you have a list of your subscribers and your people who are former subscribers and you want to combine them together and send it out a mailing to everybody. So maybe it's your Christmas card list or whatever. Does anybody send Christmas cards anymore? I do.
Bob does. He actually has an extensive Christmas card list. We've talked about this during our Postal Affairs program, but he's, I think you're one of the USPS's largest mailers because of your Christmas list.
Yeah, single piece mailer, yeah.
Yeah, right. That's a lot of stuff he sends out. Pallets and pallets worth of Christmas cards.
Yeah, so if you have lots of lists that you want to combine together, so if you have a master mailing that you want to do at the end of the month or the end of the quarter, and you want to combine everything together, but you don't want to send multiple pieces per address. So if you have John Smith and he's on 3 or 4 of your different lists, you want to combine that information so he only gets one copy, right? So that's a really common one. Another is the idea of creating a complete record. So if you have one list, yeah. So this is
sorry.
Rob just got a gleam in his eye. That was awesome. Yeah. So this is an idea. So if you have John Smith. And if you have one list that maybe has like car models, and you have another list that has income levels, and then you have another list that has their account information, or maybe you're a nonprofit and it has their donation history in it.
I can make one master list?
You can have one master list that has all that information for that record. So that's a really, really powerful thing because you have all these different points of information, and to be able to have one single view of that contact can be a really powerful thing, because then you can start looking at, okay, what was their donation rate last year? and know what's their income level. And then you can take a look at that and say, okay, based on their income level, is their donation rate kind of applicable for them? Did they stretch a little bit, or could they donate a little bit more? Can we send something to them saying, oh, we saw that you donated $100 last year. We recommend that this year you donate $125 or whatever it happens to be. And it allows you to kind of give that extra little nudge to that customer. Or if you have like their buying history, and you can get lists that have information about like trigger events. So for example, maybe they just had a child, or they just retired, or they just bought a new house. You can actually get that information, and then based on their actual buying history, you can take a look at the trigger information, and then you can say, okay, well, I see that you've been buying car things. Maybe you need to buy a car seat because
I spend a lot of time cross-referencing things. So I have my main list, and I look at that, but then I have to go look at another list and look that person up.
Mm-hmm.
So I could combine this together and have it all together in one list.
Yeah, and so and then for each person, even if for a customer support view, right?
Mm-hmm.
If you know that they've recently purchased a certain item and someone's calling in, you can think automatically, okay, are they calling in about this new item? And you can kind of enhance that user experience.
Cool.
So the complete record is kind of a cool tool that you have there. Another option that you have is what I call householding. That's kind of a generic term for being able to combine multiple people that are at the same address. So if you have John Smith and you have Mary Smith and then you have Jane Smith, and they all live together at the same house, you've got each of them on different lists, or maybe you have them all in the same list, but you really only want to send one copy. So if you're a magazine, you only want to send one copy of the magazine to that house, because pretty much a magazine, everybody, at least in my house, everybody reads the magazines that are interested in that magazine. So you can actually...
I want my own, okay? I don't want to read some worn out magazine.
That sounds a little like my daughter. She's very protective of her magazines. So, but you can actually combine all of those records and then say, okay, instead of being John Smith, Mary Smith, or just stripping off Mary Smith, and then she doesn't get anything and it's just to John Smith, she's going to feel left out.
Sure.
Where if you combine it all and say the Smith family, then it becomes a little bit like, oh, okay, this is for everybody. And then, of course, you save the printing and the postage along with that. So another one is that case that Baird talked about, is the idea of excluding certain records from your mailing. So if you have a do not mail list, so you have a list of people who have called in and said specifically, I no longer want to receive mail from you, you can actually compare that to your main list and exclude those records automatically. So and then you can also use it for the ways that Baird talked about. You can find those hidden people, those people that are not your customers that should be, and
target them specifically.
Yeah, and see what results you get from that. And then another one is that ability to find common records. So, for example, if you have one list that has that's your recent donor accounts, and then you have another list that's your kind of high income people in that area, then you can find the overlap and you can market to them a little bit more.
So one thing to call out here too is, as we are starting to head into the fall mailing season, obviously volumes are going to be going up as there's a lot of catalogs and those
Sure.
types of items being sent out. The householding is a very important tool there in being able to, target, for example, a single catalog for a particular household, and then instead of sending them multiple copies, save postage, but still get the message out to everyone that you want to reach.
Right.
And the USPS is enough right now without duplicate pieces running around.
And I might just add to that as well. I know, again, talking to some mailers who've called in, that it just doesn't look very good to send 3 of the same pieces to the same household, all for the same name. So it just makes the mailer not look quite as professional if they're sending out duplicate pieces.
Right. There's kind of the tangible cost of a duplicate record, and then there's the kind of the intangible, which is kind of that customer experience and that customer impact and view of what are they going to think when they get multiple copies of this piece.
We have a question here that makes sense. When it comes to householding like that, Kim, as you said, what happens if there's multiple last names at the address? So you have Bob Smith and Mary Jones, and everything else is the same. Can you put it together as the Smith-Jones residence?
So there's
Actually, we have an example during the demo. The answer is yes.
Perfect.
Yep.
Okay, we'll come back to that. Sorry, Kim, I took your control away there. Go ahead.
All right. My button
Now
seems to
it'll
not
work.
be working
Now
there.
it'll work. There we go.
Okay, so speaking of our demo, Baird, I think it's over to you. I'm excited to see what examples he's come
I'm
up
excited about this as well. All right, I'm going to hand control over to you, Baird, and
Okay.
you have the helm.
All right. Show my screen. Number one, show.
We see you.
Is that right? Do you see? Can you see my mouse here? I'm moving.
Yep.
Yep. Okay. All right. So here's bulk mailer. We're at the home screen, and what I'm going to show you here today are a couple of examples of using merge purge to refine the records. I like Kim's terminology there. So get rid of duplicates, consolidate records, so that we have two records with some data in each record. We want to combine it into a single record. We want to treat the name field respectfully, so that we don't exclude Mary Smith if we mail to John Smith or vice versa. And we want to be able to provide the list owner with a nice report at the end of the process to let them know, give them a good idea of how many records were deleted, how many were found to be excluded, etc. So the nice thing about bulk mailer, doing this within bulk mailer, is that in preparation to do proper matching for any kind of deduplication or merging, at the heart of it is this process called matching. And matching is only as good as your input data in terms of how well it's formatted and how well it's standardized. So the nice thing about working with bulk mailer is that you can bring your lists into bulk mailer. You're going to want to run your address quality steps, the move update in particular, because you may have, so a scenario would be, here's a store, they've got a list from last year, they've got a list from 2012, they got a list from this year, they want to combine all the lists, remove the duplicates, but people move, and you're not going to find a duplicate if you don't run move update first on all of those lists, so that you have the current address for all of those recipients. So again, you've got bulk mailer, a wonderful tool for cleaning addresses, for formatting addresses, and for updating addresses so that you've got the most current address, and that way if you've got lists from different periods, they'll all point to the same new current address for that recipient. So now that you've got the data in bulk mailer and you've run your address quality steps, address correction, move update, you can even run deduplication if you want to, but merge purge is going to run its own form of deduplication. So you can go ahead and skip that if unless you want to specifically look at a particular list. So what I've prepared here for today, we're going to take a look at an example of two what we call primary lists and one exclusion list. An exclusion list, sometimes called a suppression or a knockout list or a kill list, a do not mail list. So this is the list of addresses. Here we've got 412. If they're found within the primary list 1 or primary list 2, we want to exclude them from the output. And we also want to dedupe any records that we find inside of each one of these separate lists or across both of those lists. So we start up the merge purge process. And this graphic here I find particularly useful. The first option that we have here under merge purge is just combining the lists, eliminating duplicates, And I might add as well consolidating. Again, so that concept of you have Mary Smith at 123 Main Street and John Smith at 123 Main Street.
Bayard,
we want to be able to...
Bayard.
Yeah,
we're going to interrupt you here for just a moment. For one reason or another, your screen is not updating, so I'm going to take control back really fast and then hit.
Okay.
Is,
hold on, let's see. Oh, it says pause. Let me do this again. All right.
There you go.
There we go. Okay. Yeah. For some reason the button was paused there. Okay. So here's the screen I was referring to. I like this one because it's graphical and it shows the three main processes that we have for merge purge. So this first one, combine the fields, eliminate the duplicates, but also I would add consolidate records. So again, as that John Smith at 123 Main Street on the first address, and then the next record is Mary Smith at 123 Main Street. We're going to be able to consolidate those into a single record, and we'll see that in a minute. The scenario we're going to actually run is combining the files and excluding some records, but it has that same record consolidation technique, so we'll see that. This last one is one that Rob had mentioned, where you've got multiple files and you want to find all the addresses that exist across that group of files. And if we have time, I've got an example there too. So let's go ahead and start our exclusion process. Click Next. So I've added, here are the primary files. So I've got primary file number 1, primary file number 2, and we saw these in the home screen. So these are actually .bmf. These are actually bulk mailer files. They've already been cleansed. They've already been move updated. So I'm confident that I'm going to be able to do some high quality matching in order to find duplicates and to match on exclusions.
So one thing that's kind of important to point out here is, even though Bayard has mapped a couple bulk mailer files here, you don't actually have to use bulk mailer files as your input. We recommend it just to have that really cleansed list to start from, but you can actually import any type of a file directly into the Merge Purge tool, and we will do at least a minimal standardization of those input files before we actually start the comparison process. So it's really important to know that even though this demo shows the bulk mailer files, it could be any type of a file. So it could be Excel, it could be a text file, it could be a DBF file, and each of the different files that you import can be of a different format.
I want to put in a request for those Post-it notes, though. Okay, that would save me a lot of time.
I'll write that down.
Hey, to Kim's point about the parsing, let's say one file has first and last names together in a single field, and your other file has the first name in its own column and the last name in its own column. What about that scenario, Kim?
Yeah, so in that case, what it'll do is, part of the import process in bulk mailer is we actually standardize that information. So if you map that file with the first name and last name in the same field, we're actually going to parse that as we import it, so that when you're comparing to those other lists that have the information separated out, we'll be able to do a better match that way.
Excellent. So if we were looking for a common family name in the last name field, even though one of those input files has the full name field, so the full name is all together in a single field, we're still going to be able to match on just last name.
Right.
Okay. So again, I've chosen to use bulk mailer files because that allows me to do these preparatory steps, and it's a little bit quicker for the demo. Okay, so here are my primary files. Primary file number 1, file number 2. I want to mail to these people, but I want to dedupe them, of course. Now the comparison here's where you tell the program what you consider to be a match. So if you select individual, Bob Smith is not going to match to Mary Smith. Those are going to be two separate records, and they'll stay as two separate records. So a scenario might be, say, a school grade report. They've got Bobby Smith in the 2nd grade, they got Mary Smith in the 3rd grade. We want to mail to both of those. We don't want to combine those records. If we choose the family, it's going to go based on last name. So if it's Bob Smith and Mary Smith, those will get consolidated into a single record. But if it's Bob Smith and Mary Jones at the same address, they'll remain as two separate records. Business sort of follows that same process. What we're going to do here today is we're going to use the address level. So we're going to look at every record that's in the same address, and then we're going to consolidate records or we're going to consider those to be matches. And so we're going to have Bob Smith and Mary Smith at 123 Main Street. We're going to consider those to be matches. And we get to the next step of consolidating. We're going to want to consolidate that down into a single record.
So for the question that we received, then they would be looking to use the address option then, correct?
This would be one, yeah. This would be the one that sometimes called householding or residence matching.
Right.
Gotcha.
Okay. Here's the record consolidation steps that you can take. So what I'm going to do here is if I get two records that have the same address and the same family name, I'm going to change it to be the last name family. So it'll be the Jones family. So we've got the word the plus whatever the last name happens to be and the last name. Down here, if we have different names, now this question came in as well, what if we've got two different names at the same address, so two different first and last names? What we're going to do here is we're going to choose to combine them with the and %. So it'll be Bob Smith and Mary Jones in the single output record. Now, let's talk a little bit about here. It says something I skipped over here. It says highest priority record. What they're referring to there is this list right here. Whichever one is listed as ID number 1 is considered the highest priority record. And so unless the program is told differently, and if it finds a match across these two input files, it's going to grab the one that it finds first in this first record, or in this first file. Let me back up one quick step here. I did want to take a quick look at the input files here. So here's my primary list, number 1. Let's get to know some of the people on this list. So we've got here Bill Gates, you may have heard of him, and we've got Melinda Gates. So here's an example, 2 records, same address, but obviously different first names, same last name. And then we've got Russell Wilson. You may have heard of him. He's showing up here as just a single entry on this list.
Isn't that?
But if I go to
he was on
primary list
Taylor Swift not long ago, wasn't he?
He was on TV for something. I can't remember what it was. But, okay, so here we have the primary list. So I've opened up the second list, the primary list, and let's go to the view here. And I've got Russell Wilson at Oakland Park Towers 2, but I've got this friend of his, Ashton Meme, also at that same address. So this will be an example where we've got 2 individuals living at the same address. So we'll keep an eye on. And then we've got here Jeff Bezos there as well. So we've got some duplicates thrown in there, but I wanted to just throw some names out there so we could kind of keep track of them when we get to the output stage. So back to our merge purge steps. So we're going to do this process here. We're going to combine those 2 primary lists and then apply the exclusion list. So here's primary number 1. Here's primary number 2. We're going to do the address level matching. So everything at the same address gets thrown into the same match group. And then within that match group, we're going to consolidate records. Here's the record consolidation instructions. So we tell the program we want to replace, put in the last name, followed by the family. And if there's 2 different people with different last names, then we're just going to put an ampersand between them.
So it's important to note with that combining of multiple names. So if you have, Bob Jones, Bob Smith, Mary Jones, even if you have multiple of those, we'll actually combine. If you have like 3 or 4 names that are all at the same address, we'll be combining all of them with that ampersand. So it's not just the first 2. So it's a complete view of all the people that live at that address.
So if I were sending out a mailing about when not to pass, and I wanted to make sure Russell Wilson got his own copy, I wouldn't want to use this then.
Right.
Yeah, you should send him that sometime before next season. Okay, so here we get a little deeper into record consolidation. The address. Use highest priority record. So again, it's going to be the first record in that first list. Or look for secondary address. So in this case, if the address in the second list has a more complete address, we're going to replace the address in that first record with the address from the second record.
We have a question asking what happens with condo numbers? What happens with apartment numbers, condo numbers? How do we...
Yeah. So That's a good. So I assume you're saying, let's say the first one is missing the secondary or the apartment or the condo number, and the second address includes that address.
I would assume there's probably multiple scenarios here. Maybe we've got Bob and Mary, or Bob Smith and Mary Jones with similar information but different condo numbers, or I mean, there's a number of scenarios you could come up with.
Yeah, so if the address is a discrete address, so
Okay.
so if the condo number is different, then we'll treat that as a separate record group.
All right.
But if you have, you know, both of them and one of them has Mary Jones and there's no condo number, and the other is Bob Smith and he does have a condo number, it depends on how the address how the address is matched together. So there are some custom options that we have for actually matching. So the business, individual, family, all of those options are kind of the generic ways of matching, but we actually have a custom option that allows you to select additional fields. So for example, if you have an account number field that may be unique across all the lists that you're working with, then you can use that account number field or any other field that you have in your list to uniquely identify that group.
So I've got a lot of control then on whether these are combined at that point. I'm not stuck using some random rule that doesn't do what I want it to.
Yeah.
That's a very good point. Once you get beyond using the address or the name, which are the ones that a lot of people obviously think of right away, but we've certainly seen examples where people used account numbers or promotional codes or other like a user-based data that they've imported into either a user text field or a user number field, and and so if you have a unique identifier, then that's the perfect key to use in your matching. So in that case, let me back up just one step so you see how I got here. This was down here in the custom option, define criteria.
Yeah, and so you can.
You also have the ability, so last name, if you want to have a more, what they call a greedy match, a match where it might be Livingston and Livingstein or something, and you can set this to be more loose on the last name. So an Olson versus an Olsen, they'll match, or you could be more exact. The thing with matching, nice thing about the Merge Purge tool is that you can run it and look at your results. And if you decide that, we're over-matching, I want to restrict my criteria a little bit, so I'm a little bit matching on fewer of these criteria, then you can come back and rerun it, and Bulk Mailer will keep track of each one of the runs that you do.
Yeah, so one of the things that everyone needs to keep in mind as they're working with this is, having a little bit of an understanding of the area that you're mailing into. And for example, if you're mailing into an area with a number of high rises, that could change your matching strategy quite dramatically versus if you're mailing into, let's say, a single family dwelling area only.
Now I could run this multiple times and fine tune my matching, right? I'm not stuck making it up.
Exactly, good point. It doesn't, those input files that we've identified, they stay untouched. They're just source files. The output file will show you the results, or what we call the retained records. And absolutely, you can run it and fine-tune it until you get the results that you're looking for. Okay, so again, we've chosen these two options here. Let's see, phone number here. I think I didn't show you, but I've got a couple phone numbers on some of the duplicate records. So we'll see if it's going to grab the phone number out of the record that's going to be thrown away and add it to the record that's going to be kept.
There's a question here about whether does Merge Purge require two files, or can you run it against one?
You can run it against.
You can run it against. Well, let's back up and look at the scenarios again. So obviously, in this case, I take that back. You can run it on a single file, and it will remove duplicates, and you can consolidate records on a single file. Same thing with this one here. Now, for the inclusion record, I think you're going to need to have two files.
Yeah,
this one here, the one that we're running. Let's back up here. We could just have a single primary file.
Yeah.
So for this scenario, I've got two input files, but it would certainly do the same thing if we just had a single input file. But so I think for these two options, you have to have two files. You have to identify a primary list and which can be one or more files. And same thing with here. You're going to have one or more files as your primary, and then the secondary file is the one that's going to look for commonalities. So you would need two there. But for this one here, it'll run with just a single file. Okay, these options down here, again, it's a matter of, they call it data salvaging. So before we toss out a record as a duplicate, we want to look in there. If there's an email address and the record that we're keeping doesn't have an email address, we're going to grab it out of the one that's being tossed out and bring it into the one that's missing the email address. Same thing with the subscription data. So these are like date fields, subscriber date fields.
Yeah.
And the idea is to, before you throw it away, you want to salvage any useful data out of the record before it becomes left behind.
Right, and it's just important to note here, we're not messing with the input files again. So, you always have the ability to go back and if you don't get the results you really wanted the first time, you haven't lost everything. Nothing's destroyed. You can go back and make your tweaks and tuning and try it again.
Well, I would imagine this is something that you get better at. Me, the first time that I do it, I'm probably going to ham-handedly destroy my lists and not get it right the first time. But this is something I can fine-tune then, take those lists and say, oh, no. Bob and Mary Smith are plainly not the same address, therefore I did something wrong. I go back and change my criteria, change my rules, and run it again until I've got the list that's exactly the way I want it to be.
Right. That goes back to the earlier comment of it's kind of like a black art. So, you learn how to move the dials just right to get the results that you're looking for.
Gotcha.
Yeah, that's very true. And you can as well, it's probably a good idea, is to put in some seed records in there so that in your input files, so that when they get processed, some seed records in there like I did there with Bill and Melinda Gates, just so I got something I can go check on to make sure that it processed as I expected. Okay, so here's the exclusion file. So anything in this list is going to be excluded or suppressed out of the output, what we call the retained records. Now here's the output records. So I'm outputting to a bulk mailer file. That way, when it's time to do the mailing, it's already in bulk mailer. It saves me a step. It also makes it easy to look at and view the results. If I want, I can also choose to output all of the duplicate primary records from those two primary files and output all the records that were excluded. So I can create these additional files that will, they're not mailing files, but they're files that will help me analyze how well my deduping and matching and excluding went.
So these are files that are going to show me what happened. So I don't have to go parse through every record in there and say what happened here. I can actually go look at the thought process behind it.
Yeah, and there's actually a set of reports at the end as well that'll give you a little bit more insight into what happened with each of those records.
Handy.
Yep. So that'll be the first thing. That'll be our first stop, is to look at the summary file or the summary report to see how things worked overall, and then we can go delve down into the details of the specific records. So here it's importing the files, it's checking for duplicates, deleting the purged files, or deleting the purged records, and we're done. We get a nice quick read on the progress screen here. So the green bar has gone completely across. We got a quick read on the output. We've got 1,500 records. We found 187 duplicates. 395 were removed, and what it means by removed is that they were found to match records within the exclusion list. And then this missed records, those are 17 records in the exclusion file that didn't match anything in the primary file. So you're going to have, usually you'll have some that didn't match any of the primary. That's what that shows. Let's take a quick look at the report. So at the top here, it gives us the basic information about what we were doing when we ran the merge purge process. So we told it, I ran this as a custom, looks like. So here we go, good example. I intended to run this as an address comparison, but I think when we were talking about custom, I may have left it in the custom mode. And that was going to do zip code and address. looks like it's pretty close to what would have been just the same thing as an address level or a householding level. Here's the list IDs. So here's our first primary list. We had 14 duplicates within that list. 387 of those records were removed because they matched something in the exclusion list. Here's the primary number 2. We had 173 duplicates in that list. Only 8 of those matched the exclusion list. And then again, those 17 records that were in the exclusion list that didn't match anything in the primary list 1 or 2. So this is a nice kind of high-level report. Plus, again, tells you what settings you set when you ran your process. So we could save that as a PDF and then compare it to the output files. Let's go back to the home screen, and because I exported to a bulk mailer file, here's my output. So this is my retained records or my output file. If I was happy with the results, it's already here in bulk mailer, ready to go, and I could go ahead and do my mailing. But let's go ahead and take a look at some of those records. So you remember we had Bill and Melinda Gates, 2 different records in one file, and I think we had another Bill Gates in the second file. And so they've all been consolidated down into just the Gates family. Here's Russell Wilson and Ashton Meem combined together into a single record and going to the same address. So that's where the record consolidation displays. So you can see we had a couple other ones here that just happened to be in the list. So they're pretty easy to spot. In bulk mailer, I can use the filter feature. I'm going to filter for records containing blanks in the first name. And here I can see all of the records that were consolidated, starting with 2 input records and then consolidated down into a single record. So go back to display all African records. So this looks pretty good. I'm seeing the consolidation that I wanted to see. I'm confident that based on that report that I've excluded a bunch of records and that were in the exclusion list, and I've also gotten rid of all the duplicates. So now I'm ready to go and do my mailing with a high level of confidence that I'm not going to be mailing 2 pieces to the same household, and I'm not going to be mailing to anybody on my exclusion list.
Hey, Baird, there in your list, the one where you inserted the ampersand, it looks like there's not a space after the ampersand. Is that something you would then correct by setting? It's hard to tell from the font.
It's hard to tell. Let's get a little closer. So there's my cursor. I think looks like it might be just the font. That's showing us here. Okay. So there is indeed a space there.
Okay.
But you're right. It's maybe a little small, especially over the WebEx or the sharing screen.
Yeah, I should borrow Bob's glasses.
Oh, we're running out of time. Do we have time for one more demo?
You got a quick one, sure.
Okay, let's make it quick. All right, because I thought this was pretty powerful too. So we're going to go back in. In this case, we'll close that mailing file. We're going to go back in, and in this case, we're going to do this combine files. And so one of my cohorts here, he recommended this as an option. So we've got a list, an address list of people that we know and we mail to, and then we have a gala event. A number of people show up. They sign the registry as they come in, and we want to send them a thank you card. Well, they just signed with their first and last name. They didn't sign with their complete address. We don't want to send it to the entire list because not everybody came to the gala affair. So now what we've got is we've got a name and address list, which is think of as our master list. And we're going to match on the individual in this case. And we've got a name-only list. So this is the list from the guest book as they came into the gala affair. So now what we want is we want to do what this little picture shows here. We want to find the intersection of these 2 files. So one file is everybody in our organization, including addresses and good contact information. The other file is just first and last name. So what I want to do is I want to get the addresses of the people who just signed into the guest book. And so here's the name only, goes into the second position. And we'll go ahead and run this guy. And so what this should do, this should give us all of the addresses that are in our main contact list that match the first and last names of the people that signed into the guest book. And we'll take a look at the report, and we can see here, so our name and address list, our total list is 1,119. But as far as the people who came to the event, only 539 showed up. We got their first and last names. We had somebody painstakingly enter them into a spreadsheet. We imported that into bulk mailer, and now we've got a list. Now we've got an output file that we can use for our mailing. That is here. Purge, output, BMF, and view. Let's see. And something obviously went haywire here because I'm not getting any output. Let's see.
So in this case, it was probably something then in the way that the template was set up.
Yeah, look at that. So they also ended up in the MIST file, and probably, yeah. So as Bob pointed out, we don't touch the input files. So I haven't, I still have my input data. Let's see, name and address list.
Black art, Bob?
Yep,
yeah.
that's right.
Be, but
I know what I did wrong. Okay, I need to define custom. That's right, because I'm going to be using last and first name. I'm not going to be using address because there's yeah. So I'm sorry. I needed to use this custom field to say match on last and first name only. Don't try to match on address because guess what? One of those files doesn't have any addresses in it. So we'll see if we get a better result this time.
Well, he debugged it pretty quickly there, so my confidence is going up.
Yeah. It'll give you a feel.
Yeah, Rob, you're holding
real process of
even I
tuning
could
your
do
match.
that.
yeah.
This is how you just kind of iterate through tuning your matches and your results to get to ultimately what you're happy with.
There's a lot of power here, so it doesn't surprise me that there's some complexity to setting it up.
Right.
Okay, so now we've got views and okay, so now we've got our list with it's the output list here, and we've got our addresses. So total count 531.
Baird.
So again, what we did there, once I figured out to match only on first and last name, is that we had one file with addresses and first and last name that was the large list, and then we had the second list that was just first and last name only. We were able to select all of the addresses in the large list based on the ones that were in that first and last name only list.
Thank you for the demo, Baird. We appreciate it.
Okay.
Kim, are we looking at standard or pro for this feature?
So this is a feature that's available in both Bulk Mailer Professional and Bulk Mailer Business. It's unfortunately not available in Bulk Mailer Standard at this point.
Okay. All right, so we do want to throw out here that if this is something that you're interested in, go ahead. As Kim mentioned, we're not going to try to sell you something you don't need. So if you want to know the applicability of this, go ahead and give us a call. Number on the screen, and our folks will walk you through that, or email us. Let them know you saw it on the webinar, and they will walk you through, yeah, sure, you could do that, or no, you're one of those people that this doesn't make a whole lot of sense for. So please, absolutely, we would love to hear from you and have a look at what's going to work for you, because that's ultimately what's important. Last thoughts, Bob, Kim?
No, I think if you have any questions, it looks like we had a couple of questions throughout the webinar. If your question wasn't answered during the webinar, we'll follow up with you after the session.
Perfect. And on behalf of everyone at Satori Software, I would like to thank our speakers for coming and spending quality time with us today. Bayard, thank you so much for the demonstration. Really makes these things come to life. Also want to thank Bob Shimmick for his impression of Madden. We enjoyed that. And Kim Mock, product owner. Always a pleasure to have you on board and have you in the studio.
Yes.
Very knowledgeable. I really enjoyed this. And this looks like something that I can use in creating my marketing for these webinars. So I'm excited to get started. We want to thank everybody for joining us today, and we'd appreciate it if you took a moment to complete the brief survey that you're about to be offered as you log out of the webinar. We would like to take that feedback and use it to improve our webinar series. As I mentioned, this is number 5 in the Getting the Most Out of Bulk Mailer series, and we'd love to hear your feedback on what else you might like to see in that series. As I mentioned, this webinar will be available in its entirety, probably even this afternoon. As soon as I get it posted, we'll have it up on the SatoriSoftware.com website so you can refer back to it or point somebody else to it if you'd like. For Satori Software, I'm Rob Perrin. I'm the Director of Multimedia Marketing. And once again, I would like to personally thank you for attending this webinar. On behalf of all of us at Satori, I would like to wish you smooth mailing ahead.